Hello everybody, welcome back to Let's Code This. In this video tutorial we're going to be building this real estate type homepage. I'll just quickly scroll through to kind of give you an idea of what exactly we'll be building. As we scroll you can see that we get this kind of CSS transition effect on the header. And then we have some carousel sliders which we'll be using Slick Slider plugin for. We've got a list of potential real estate agents, some marketing material, services, another slider for client testimonials, contact us, and a nice footer. Also, the page is fully responsive, so if I pull this over a bit and we take it down to about maybe the size of like an iPhone, we get this hamburger menu that when clicked, we get our flyout menu with our navigation links. And then if we go down to the sliders, they also collapse down to one at a time rather than four at a time. And then everything else collapses down quite nicely. And yeah, so that's what we're going to be building. It's going to be a lot of HTML, CSS, some JavaScript. I'm also going to be leveraging the jQuery library. And we're also importing some custom fonts from Google Fonts. I will not be going into depth about how to do the Slick Slider plugin or importing the custom fonts. If you'd like more information on those, just leave a comment down in the video and I can get back to you on that. So let's get going on this. I'm starting here with a completely empty folder on my hard drive. I'm going to go ahead and just, let's pull this over. Right click, open with code. So we can get VS Code over here. Let's go ahead and stick it over there on the side. I'm going to drag this over a bit. About right there. And let's create a new file called index.html. And then let's go ahead and create a new directory. Call it CSS. Inside of the CSS directory, we will create another file called styles.css. And let's get going on the HTML first. So like I stated, we're going to have some plugins and third-party libraries we're going to be using. I'm going to go ahead and paste in the head of the code here. Let's go ahead and do some word wrap. Pull this over a little bit more so we can see more of the code. Go ahead and collapse that. Okay, so here is the head tag of the page. We have our standard meta tags, a title, a link to the Slick Slider CSS file, a link to our own custom CSS file in our CSS directory, a link to the jQuery library, a link to Font Awesome. Forgot to mention that. I'll also be using Font Awesome here and there for small icons. Again, if you want more information on this, please leave a comment on the video. This is a pretty big project, so I'm going to be kind of going only into the code for this website. And then we have the Slick Slider plugin JavaScript. So all of these are required for this video project. If any of them are missing, it will not work properly. So let's go on to the body tag. I'm going to go ahead and add the body. And then let's pull this back over so we can see our menu without being collapsed. There it is. So if we look at our menu, we have a logo on the left, nav links on the right. So I'm going to go ahead and create a div to kind of hold the whole thing. I'll give it an ID of header hero container. Inside of that, let's create a header tag to hold the entire header. And inside of that, we're going to use FlexBox. Whoops. So I'll create a div with class of flex and also give it a class of container. We'll see why in 1 second. And this is because we have an element over here to the left and then our nav links over here to the right. You could use like float left, float right, or tables for this. I'm going to use FlexBox. It's, in my opinion, the better way to lay out elements on a page. So there's our Flex container. Let's create a link tag or an anchor tag for the logo. Give it an ID of logo. It's not going to link anywhere since we're only building one page, so we'll just put the hashtag in for the href and the text stated. Next, we'll create a nav element. That's going to hold our links over to the right. And then we also need that hamburger menu on smaller screens, so let's create that. Button ID of nav toggle. Class equals hamburger menu. Inside of that, we're going to create 3 span tags to have those 3 lines that make up the hamburger menu. I'll give each of these a class of strip. Just go ahead and copy paste it 3 times, and then let's create an unordered list with an ID of nav menu. This is going to hold our navigation links. Each of these will have a list item. Inside of it will be a link, again with href of the hashtag, because they're not going to link anywhere. This one is home. Let's copy paste this a few more times for properties, agents, about, news, and contact. Just quickly fill these in. Properties, agents, and so forth. Contact. Okay, and then I'm also going to give the home link a class of active. And that's so that we can kind of highlight it because we're currently on the home page. It's a different color than the rest of them. Okay, so that should do it for the HTML of the header. Let's move on to this hero section with the background image that's kind of behind a faded black background. So under this header tag, let's create a section, give it an ID of hero. And let's create a div with a class of fade. It'll be a completely empty div. It's just going to be that kind of black faded style. Then let's create a div with a class of hero text, and that's going to hold our marketing text here, buy and sell real estate properties, and the lorem ipsum text underneath. So inside of this div we'll have an h1, buy and sell real estate. Actually, let's just buy and sell real estate properties. And I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this into a paragraph tag underneath the h1. There we go. That should do it for the hero section. Let's go ahead and move on, and this time we're going to be also finished with this header hero container. So underneath the closing div of the header hero container, let's move on to the next section, which is this how it works section. So let's create a section tag, ID of how it works, and then inside of that we're going to have a div with a class of container. Inside of the container class we'll have an h2 for the header, how it works. Underneath the h2 we're going to create a FlexBox, so div with a class of flex. And the reason I'm using flex is because we have 3 things kind of evenly laid out horizontally here. Whenever I see that, I like to use FlexBox to accomplish that. Inside of the FlexBox we'll have just a div. Inside of the div we'll do our first one, which is find a property. This is where we're going to use Font Awesome. Again, if you have questions about Font Awesome, please leave them down in the comments of the video. So give it the class that Font Awesome calls out for to get this little home icon. Underneath that we have h4 tag, find a property. Underneath that we have a paragraph. I'll just copy and paste it. And then let's copy and paste this inner div 2 more times here for buy a property and investing. So let's change this one to buy a property and change the third one to investing. We also need to update the Font Awesome classes. This one is a $, so I think it is $, and this one is a little chart or graph. That would be FA-chart line. Okay, that should do it for the how it works section. So let's move on to the next one, which is this properties slider. So the HTML for this is going to be a little bit more involved. So let's get into that. Create a section tag, ID of properties. Inside of that, we're going to have a div, class of container. Inside of that, h2 for the header properties. And then underneath that, let's create another div with an ID of properties slider. We're going to call out to this also with a class of slick. We'll call out to this in our JavaScript a little bit later when we initialize our slider. So inside of this, we're going to have, let's see, looks like there's about 5 or 6 items in here. So let's go ahead and create the first one. We'll just wrap the whole thing in a div. Inside of the div, we have our image. So let's give it an alt tag of property1. And then for the source attribute here, I have some images that I have already hosted on my website that we can use. So I'll copy and paste that into the source attribute. And then underneath the image, let's create a div, give it a class of property details. And this is going to hold kind of the price, the beds, baths, and so on. So inside of that div, we'll create a p tag with a class of price, $3,400,000. Underneath the p tag, let's create a span class of beds. That'll be 6 beds. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this span a few more times for the baths and the square feet. So beds, baths, square feet, and then we have 4 baths and 4,250 square feet. So let's do that, 4,250 square feet. And then underneath that span tag, we have the address. So let's put the address in an address tag, 480 12th unit 14 San Francisco, California. And that's one slider item. So let's go ahead and highlight this entire div element, copy and paste it a few more times. Let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So let's copy and paste this 4 more times to get 5 total items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm just going to leave all of the properties details the same for the sake of time, but let's go ahead and update the images, which will just be property 1, 2, 3, 4. So property1.jpg, let's change this one to property2.jpg, property 3. And these are all different images I have hosted on my website. Property4.jpg, and we'll just reuse property1.jpg one more time down here at the bottom. So that's the HTML for the slider. Let's move on to, actually I think I missed one thing. We have this view all property listings button. So let's go ahead and add that in, and that should add in at the bottom of the property sliders div, because it's not part of the actual slider itself. It just kind of sits down at the bottom. So let's find our properties sliders div here, and we will underneath it create a button. We'll give it a class of rounded, and it says view all property listings. Okay, and that should do it for this section. Let's go ahead and move on to the next section, which is the agents section here. So again, we'll create a section tag, give it an ID of agents. Inside, we'll create a div tag with a class of container, and then inside of that we'll have the h2 for the header, which is the word agents, and then we'll create a paragraph, and I'm going to give it a class of large paragraph, because as we can see it's a little bit larger text here. And let's just go ahead and copy paste it into our p tag with a class of large paragraph. Underneath that, we're going to create another FlexBox, again because we have these things kind of laid out in a horizontally uniform manner. So whenever I see that, I like to use FlexBox. Let's create the first little card there. Create a div with a class of card. Inside we have an image. Let's give it an alt tag of Realtor1. And then again, I have images hosted that you can use. And again, this is a free template created by colorlib.com. So this is not my design. This is just a free template I found online that I liked. And I pulled all of the images also from colorlib.com. So there will be links in the description, and all the code will be available as well in the description of the video. So we have an image here, person1, and then let's create an h3 tag for the person's name. And then a p tag for the words real estate agent. And that's one card there. And you can see we have 6 total cards. So let's copy and paste this card 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's update the persons to or the image to person2.jpg, and then person3.jpg, person4.jpg, person5, person6. These are all images I have hosted. We'll update the names here. This will be Dave Simpson, Ben Thompson, Kyla Stewart, Rich Moffitt, and finally Stuart Redman. Okay, let's move on here. That's the HTML for this section. Let's go ahead and move on to this little marketing area. We are the best real estate company. So underneath this last closing section tag, let's create a new section, give it an ID of the best. Inside, we're going to have a flex container. So a div with a class of flex and a class of container. And then inside of that, let's create the image tag. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and reuse one of the property images that we used on the slider. So we'll just paste in an image URL. And we'll say alt tag property 1. And we'll create a div for this content on the right side of the image. Inside of that div, we have an h2. We are the best real estate company. Underneath the h2, we have a p. Again, it's a larger one, so a class of large paragraph. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the text. There we go. And then underneath that, another just regular p tag for the smaller paragraph text here. I'll copy and paste that in there. And then we have an unordered list for that bulleted list underneath here. And I'm going to go ahead and just create some li tags. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just quickly copy and paste the content in here. I'm just going to reuse the same content over and over for the sake of time. Feel free to put whatever you like in there. And then underneath that, we have a learn more button. So underneath the unordered list, let's go button, class of rounded, and then learn more. That should do it for this section. Let's move on to the services section. So let's go ahead and create another section tag. ID equals services. And then in there, let's create a div with a class of container. Inside of the container, we have the header, which is an h2, the word services. That's for this large text here. Underneath the h2, let's use, again, FlexBox. So a div with a class of flex. And then we're going to have these kind of the icon on the left and then some text and a link on the right. So let's work on each one of those. So inside of the FlexBox, let's create a div. Inside of each div, we'll have a div with a class of FAS, FA-home. This is font awesome classes. This is to get the home icon. And then underneath that div with the font awesome classes, we're going to create another div. We're going to say classes equals services card right, and that's going to kind of be all this text to the right of that icon. So inside of that div, services card right, we'll have an H3 search property, and then a paragraph tag. I'll just copy this. Oops. Copy that text into the paragraph, and then underneath the paragraph we have an anchor tag for a link, and we'll just put the hashtag in there and then learn more. Let's go ahead and copy this div 5 more times because we have 6 total. 3, 4, 5, 6, and then quickly update. This one would be FA $ for this $. The next one was FA chart line. The next one is FA building. The next one is FA search. And then we finally have FA mobile alt for that kind of mobile device icon there. And then we can also update the headers. Let's just go ahead and do that. So this one will be by property. This one's going to be investing. This one's going to be list a property. This one's going to be property locator. Last one is going to be stated apps. And that should be it for that section. Let's move on to the testimonials section underneath. So again, we'll create another section tag underneath the closing tag of the previous section. Give it an ID of testimonials. Inside of there, we're going to say div with a class of container. Inside of the container div, we're going to have our H2, which is the header, what our clients are saying. Under the header, we're going to do a div with an ID of testimonials-slider. And this is going to be what we're going to call out to with a slick slider plugin to turn this thing into an interactive, touchscreen friendly slider. Inside of that, we'll create a div for the first testimonial. Inside of the div, let's create a block quote element for the quote. Inside of the quote will be a paragraph. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste one of these. Let's see here. Paste it in. And then underneath the block quote, we have the icon of the person and their name. So let's create a div, give it a class of testimonials caption, testimonials-caption. And then inside of that, we have an image tag. I'll just say alt client 7. And I'm going to copy and paste an image that I already have hosted that we can use. Again, all these images are from colorlib.com along with this page template design. And then underneath the image, let's create a p tag with the person's name, Nick Andros, for the first one. And we have 3 total testimonials. So let's copy and paste this inner div 2 more times. I'm going to leave the quote the same. Let's just update the image. The next one will be person 5. The last one's going to be person 8. So update those image URLs, and then the names, Larry Underwood. And the last one is Fran Goldsmith. So update those, and that should do it for the HTML of the testimonials slider. So let's go on to the next section, which is contact us. So let's create another section tag, ID of contact. Inside of that, we have a div with a class of container. Inside of that, let's create an H2 for the header text, which is contact us. And then inside of that, let's use FlexBox, again, because we have one item here on the left and one item here on the right, the address and the contact info. So we'll put those in a FlexBox. Inside of the FlexBox, let's create a div with an ID of form container. And that's going to hold our contact form. And then after the form container, let's just create a div for the address on the right. So div ID equals address container. And let's work on the form container first. So inside we have an H3 and it says contact form. That's this larger text up here. Underneath the H3, let's create the actual form. So we'll create a form tag. We'll create a label with a for attribute equals name, and then content of name. Underneath that label, we'll put the actual text box. So input type equals text, ID equals name. And let's copy and paste this a few times because we have name, email, subject. So name, email, subject. Let's update this to email, 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 subject. Update all the ones as subject, okay. And then we have this kind of message larger text box, which we're going to use a text area for. So again, we'll create a label for with a for equals message, and then a text of message, and underneath that we'll create a text area, give it an ID of message, and then content of write your message here. Underneath that we have a send message button, so button class equals rounded, and then content of send message. And that should do it for the HTML, the contact form. Now let's work on this right side address container. So first thing, let's create a label, text of address for this label up here of address. Underneath that label, we will have an address tag because we have an address in there, and we'll just copy and paste the address. And then underneath the address tag, let's create a label, content of phone. Underneath that, a link. It's not going to link anywhere, so it's the hashtag, and let's put in the fake phone number. And then underneath that, actually I'm just going to copy paste this for the email. So the label for the email will just say email address, and then a fake email in there, our email at domain.com. That should do it for the contact section. Let's move on to the footer, which is the last of our HTML. So footer tag. Inside we're going to use flex and also with a class of container. So create that div with a class of flex and container. Inside of that we'll do this first section over here to the left. So let's create another div with a class equals footer hyphen about. Inside of there we have an H5 about stated, and then we have a paragraph tag. I'll just go ahead and copy and paste this content. Okay, and that should do it for that first footer section. So underneath that div, let's create another div with a class of footer quick links. Inside of that we have another H5, and that is going to say quick links. And then we have an unordered list of links here, so let's go ahead and create that. So UL li, and then a link inside about us. And then let's copy and paste that a few more times. Services, testimonials, contact, update our text, services, testimonials, contact us. Now let's do this subscribe to our newsletter and follow us section. So another div with a class of footer hyphen subscribe. Inside of that we have an H5 which says subscribe to our newsletter. Underneath that we have a div with an ID of subscribe. hyphen container. Inside of that div, we'll have our input text box with a placeholder text of enter email. And then underneath that, we're going to have a button class equals right rounded with the text of the word send inside of it. And then underneath this subscribe container div, we're going to create an H5 with a class of follow us, text of follow us, and then underneath that we'll have an unordered list of our social media links. So create an li with a link tag inside, or an anchor tag inside. Let's copy and paste that. Let's see, 3 more times. 2, 3, 4 total. And then inside of the link, we're going to use font awesome for the icon. So the first one is FAB, and then a class of FA Facebook-F. Put that in a span tag. I guess we'll just go ahead and copy this entire span tag, put it in these other links, and then instead of the FA Facebook F, we'll have FA Twitter for the Twitter icon, and we'll have FA Instagram for the Instagram icon, and FA hyphen LinkedIn hyphen in for the LinkedIn icon. And again, these are just font awesome classes. Leave a comment if you'd like more information on how font awesome works. Okay, so the last part is this copyright text at the bottom. So right after this div class equals flex container, we're going to create a small tag. So small, and then copyright, and then we'll do ampersand copy semicolon to get that little copyright icon there. 2019, all rights reserved. Do the pipe. This template is made with, and then we'll again use font awesome for the heart icon, FA hyphen heart, by, and then a link to colorlib.com since this is their work, colorlib, and there we go. Let's go ahead and word wrap this a bit. Okay. And that should wrap up the HTML element of this project. So let's move on to the CSS. Well, first off, let's pull this up in the browser and see what it looks like. So let's go ahead and open with Firefox. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Without CSS, it's pretty ugly. Obviously, we're going to fix that shortly. This is what we're going for, obviously. So let's get into the CSS. So over in your styles.css file, let's go ahead and import those custom Google fonts that I was telling you guys all about. And if you want to kind of know how this works, again, leave some comments in the video and I will get back to you with kind of how to use Google Fonts. Okay, after we've imported the fonts, let's add a comment here. Start global styles. And global styles. I like to keep my CSS very organized with comments denoting each section. So let's target the entire body tag and we'll say font family Roboto, which is one of the custom fonts, and with a backup of Helvetica and then a backup of sans serif. Remove any default margins and padding that some of the browsers may apply to the body tag. We'll give everything a font size of 1 rem, a font weight of 400, and a font color of 777, a nice light gray, and then a line height of 1.7. So that's global. Then let's target the wildcard element, which is basically every single element on the page, and we're going to say outline of none. We don't want any outlines on any elements except anything with a class of slick track or slick list. And this has to do with the slick slider plugin. If we remove the outline, it kind of messes with the CSS transitions and whatnot of the slick slider plugin. So this is necessary for that. So in here we'll do transition. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It wasn't to do with the outline. We needed to apply transitions throughout this page to have effects such as this. How when we scroll, it kind of has that animating effect rather than just a quick blink change to the different CSS states. So with a 0.4 second transition to everything on the page except the slick slider elements, that will kind of give us that effect. It's a CSS transition. I recommend you guys to read about it. Again, leave a comment if you have questions about this. I'm happy to explain further. Okay, so we're going to give a transition of 0.4 seconds to every element on the page except any elements with these two classes. That's what's happening here on this global style. Next, we'll target everything with a class of container and give it a max width of 1140 pixels. And then we'll horizontally center it on the page with a margin 0 auto, and then give padding of 0 on the top, bottom, and 20 pixels on the right and the left. And that's to kind of constrain the width of this to a max of a 1140 so it doesn't go too wide on huge monitors. Let's target the flex containers next, and we'll say display flex so that they act as a flex box. And we'll say justify content, space between, which will naturally space them out horizontally from one another. Let's target all of our header elements all the way up to H5, and we'll say margin 0, padding 0, so we're going to remove any of that default margin and padding. Then let's target both the H1 and the H2s, and these both have a font family of Playfair display with a backup of serif. And this is one of our custom fonts that we imported. We'll give these a font weight of 800. And then let's just target the H1 by itself next. And this one is going to have font size of 3 rems, line height 1.2, and a margin bottom of 1 rem. Let's target the H2 next. This is going to be a font size of 2.5 rem. We'll set the color to F69314. That should be that, yep, that orangish yellow color, which if I scroll down here, it's this color here. Next we have a margin bottom of 1 rem, and then a line height also of 1.2. Next, let's target the H3s. We'll say font size 1.4 rem, font weight 300, which is significantly lighter. Next, we'll target the H4s. H4s are font size of 1.2 rems and a font weight also of 300. And then the H5s will say font size 1 rem, and font family again is this Playfair display with a backup of serif. Next, we'll target our paragraph tags and give a margin 001 rem, which is margin 0 on the top and bottom, 0 on the right. I'm sorry, 0 on the top, 0 on the right, 1 rem on the bottom, 0 on the left. This is kind of shorthand notation. Next, let's target the buttons with a class of rounded, and we'll say background, same as this color up here. So let's copy and paste that. Get rid of the border, border none, color, FFF, font size 16 pixels, border radius 30 pixels to give it that rounded look, padding 10 pixels, top and bottom, 30 pixels on the right and the left. line height of 1.5, and cursor pointer. Okay, so next we're going to target the large paragraphs. So anything with a class of large paragraph, we'll say font size 1.25 rem and font weight of 300. In fact, we can add the P in front of this. So any paragraph tag with a class of large paragraph, font size 1.25, font weight 300. And that should do it for our global styles. So let's go ahead and move on to the header. So we'll say start header styles, end header styles, and then inside of here, target the header hero container with a hashtag because it's an ID. We're going to say min height 600 pixels, and then also calculated to 100 VH. And we'll give it a position of relative. And this is kind of ensure that the height of this is the full screen, whether it's a small screen, a large screen, a tablet screen. It's going to calculate the height to perfectly be the height of your screen. You see that? Okay, so position relative. Let's target the header tag. We'll say background transparent. Padding 1 rem 0. That's 1 rem on the top and bottom, 0 on the right and the left. Border bottom 1 pixel solid, and we'll do RGBA 255, 255, 255, 0.1 for the opacity. And then we're going to do position fixed, and this is the entire header section above this light colored border here. So position fixed because it scrolls with us as we scroll down the page. The header stays persistent. Width of 100% and a Z index of 3, and this is going to make sure it kind of stays on top of other positioned elements as we scroll. Underneath this header, let's do a logo. Let's grab the logo by its ID. Give it a font family of Roboto, Helvetica, sans serif. Font size 1.7 rem. Font weight 800. Color FFF, which is white. Text decoration none. Position relative. And top of 4 pixels. And that's just to kind of bring it down just a little bit to make it look more vertically centered there. Next, let's target the Hamburger Menu by its class. So dot Hamburger Menu. We'll say background color transparent, and then give the border 1 pixel solid and then white. Padding 3 pixels, 5 pixels. Width 30 pixels. Cursor pointer. Margin top 10 pixels, and display none because it's going to be hidden by default until we get to a smaller screen. Then it kind of comes visible here. So that's the Hamburger Menu. Next, let's do the Hamburger Menu spans that have a class of strip. Display block, height of 1 pixels, background color FFF white, margin 4 pixels top and bottom, 0 on the right and the left. And that should do it for those strips to make that Hamburger Menu look like a hamburger menu. Next, let's target the unordered list inside of the header, and that is holding these nav links here. So header UL, list style type is none. We don't want any bullets on those list items. Now let's target the list items inside of the UL. We'll say display inline block, and then margin 0, 15 pixels, 0 on the top, bottom, 15 pixels on the right and the left. And then we'll do hashtag close flyout, and that's going to target the, let's see here, that's going to target this little X button here. So, oops, let's go close flyout, display none. Next, we'll target the links inside of the headers list items. So these individual links, header ULLIA, give them a color of 999, font size 16, and text decoration none. We don't want any underline. And then we'll say header UL. If it has a class of isSticky, then we're going to target those individual link elements, and we're going to say color 000, which is black. The reason we're doing that is because when it's a sticky nav menu, like on smaller screens here, we get the flyout menu, and these have to be colored black instead of this light gray color. And so we'll see in about 20 minutes or so in our JavaScript how we can add this isSticky class to this unordered list only when we are in smaller screens and the hamburger menu is present. So let's pull this back out and continue on. So next we're going to, whoops, where am I? Next we're going to target again the individual links on hover and any that have a class of active, which our home link has the class of active. And those are all going to be FFF, which are white font color. Next, we're going to say if the unordered list has the class of isSticky, then when we hover over those links, or the one that has the class of active is going to be color F69314, which is that yellowish orange color. And that's again when we have this flyout menu. So I bring this down again. The active one is that yellow color, and then as I hover over the other ones, they turn that color as well. So that's what we're doing there. And that should do it for the header styles. So let's go ahead to the next section. We'll say start hero section styles, end hero section styles. Let's grab that hero section by its ID, give it a background image, the URL, and I'll just copy and paste the URL that I have to an image. It's going to be there, and then we'll say center, center, no repeat, and then we're going to give it a background size of cover, give it a position of absolute, top 0, left 0, a z-index of 1, and a height and a width of 100%. Okay, next let's target that div with a class of fade, and that's going to give us this fade effect look, this kind of see-through black color. So that element should have a position of absolute. We're going to say top, or sorry, we're going to say width 100%, height 100%, top 0, left 0, and the background RGBA 52, 58, 64, and then the opacity of 0.9, and this one will be a z-index of 1. Next, let's target the hero text. So the div with a class of hero text, which is this stuff here. This will be position absolute, top 50%, margin negative 75 pixels on the top, auto on the left and the right, 0 on the bottom. That's kind of going to help vertically center this text. Left 0, right 0, z-index of 2, color FFF, which is white, width 500 pixels, and text align of center. Next, we'll target the hero text paragraph tag, and we're going to say line height 1.5 em, font weight 300, and font size 1 rem. And I think that should do it for the hero section styles. Let's go ahead and save our work and see how we're looking. Okay, so we got the header, and yeah, the hero section and the header are starting to come together. We don't yet have this cool little CSS effect where this thing kind of turns white as you scroll down and shrinks in height, kind of like on our prototype. On our working prototype here, you see how it kind of turns white. So we're going to finish that part later. So there's the hero section styles. Let's go ahead and move on. The next section should be the how it works. So start, how it works, styles, end, how it works, styles. And then inside of here, we're going to do we'll target that first how it works section with its ID, give it padding of 3 rem 0, background of F8, F9 FA, text align center. And again, let's go scroll down to which section we're working on. That's this down here. So you can see the background color is a little bit of an off-white. So that is that there. Next, let's target the H2 inside of the how it works section, margin bottom of 3 rem. Then we'll target the flex, or the first div elements inside of our FlexBox. We're going to target those. So this greater than sign means the first level or immediate children of. So it's only going to grab the divs that are the first level children of our FlexBox. So how it works, dot flex, greater than sign, div. And then we're going to say width 30%. That's going to give each of these things a 30% width. Then how it works, H4, we're going to say color 343A40, margin top 1 rem, and then how it works, span.fas, that's going to grab our font awesome icons. We're going to set those to that orangish yellow color, F69314, and we'll increase the font size of those to 35 pixels, and that should do it for the how it works section. So FlexBox makes it pretty easy to accomplish stuff like this. So not a lot of CSS required for that section. Let's go down to the properties slider section. So we'll say start properties styles and properties styles. And so the first thing we're going to want to do here is grab the section tag by its ID. So hashtag properties, we're going to say margin 4 rem on the top, 0 on the right, 8 rem on the bottom, and 0 on the left. We're going to say position relative. Then we'll grab the H2 tag inside of our properties section, margin bottom of 3 rem. And then we're going to grab the container inside of our properties section, the div with the class of container, and we're going to set that to position relative. Next, we'll grab the container and we're going to use a pseudo element here, which is the before pseudo element of the container div. You can do that with a colon. We're going to give it a content of slash, and that's going to be this little element here in between the previous and the next buttons there. So content / position absolute right 80 pixels, top 18 pixels, and a color of 999. Don't forget the hashtags. before all of these color hex codes. So hashtag 999 to get that light gray color. Next, let's grab the properties slider, and then inside of that we're going to get these slick arrows, which are the next and previous. Those are going to be given to us from the slick slider plugin after we initialize this carousel. So properties slider, the A tags with a class of slick arrow. We're going to grab those. We're going to say color 000, which is black. Position absolute. Top will be -78 pixels. Right 0. Text transform uppercase. Letter spacing 0.1 rem. And text decoration of none. Okay. Next, we'll do the hashtag properties slider, and then we're going to just grab the previous button there. So a.slickprev, right 80 pixels, and then we're going to grab properties slider, and then anything with a class of slick slide, which is going to be each of our slider elements here is going to have a class of slick slide. So properties slider dot slick slide, this is going to be padding 0.15 pixels. Then let's also grab the images inside of the properties slider, and we're going to say width 100% and set those to display block. And then next we're going to look at properties slider and the property details. Whoops. I'm going to watch those misspellings. That'll definitely cause some hard to find bugs. So properties slider, and then inside of that the class of property details, which was the div container that we created to hold each of these properties details, the price, the beds, the baths, and so on. So we'll say padding 1 rem, and then properties slider, and we'll grab that price element, increase the font size to 1.2 rems, set the color hashtag 343A40, font weight 800 because it's pretty bold, and margin 0.5 rem 0. So top right 0, bottom 0.5 rems, and 0 on the left. Okay, next we're going to grab, I'm just going to copy this hashtag properties slider because I'm calling out to it quite a bit here. So copy that and I'm going to paste it down here. The next thing we're going to grab is the property details class, and then all of the span tags inside of that. And those are going to be like the beds, the baths, and all that. So 0.8 rem for the font size, padding right of 15 pixels. And then similarly, we're going to say property details, and then we're going to grab just the spans with a class of baths, and we're going to say padding left 10 pixels. And what we're doing here is kind of working on this spacing stuff here, getting it all spaced out properly. So padding left to 10 pixels, and then next we will do property details span.sqft for the square foot span, set the padding right to 0 and the padding left to 10 pixels. Next we'll grab property details span.beds and span.baths, and we're going to say border right 1 pixel solid hashtag 888 to give it that lighter gray look. And I was typing pretty quick there. I want to make sure I don't have any typos. Okay, so what we did there is we grabbed all spans with the class of beds and baths, and we gave them a 1 pixel right border, and that's going to give it this little spacer kind of thing there. We're only applying it to the beds and the baths because we don't want there to be a right border on the square foot element. All right, so let's move on here. So again, grab the property details div inside of the property slider and target the address tag. We'll say font size 0.8 rems, font style normal, margin top 0.5 rem. Then we're going to do hashtag properties to grab the entire properties section and then the rounded button. And we'll say display block, margin 2 rem on the top, auto on the right and the left, and 0 on the bottom, and give it a width of 350 pixels. And that's to make this button a little bit larger in width. And that should do it for the property section styles. That's a little bit more of an involved section because we have a lot of little CSS intricacies and we have this entire slider element. So the next section, which is the agents, should be a little bit more straightforward, a little bit easier. So let's do start agents styles and agents styles. Okay, so let's grab the section tag with an ID of agents, and we'll say margin 4 rem on the top, 0 on the right and the left, and 6 rem on the bottom, and then we'll give it padding of 0, 0, 6 rem, which is 6 rem on the bottom and 0 everywhere else, and then we'll say border bottom 1 pixel solid and hashtag CCC, which will be a light gray. Next, let's grab the large paragraph inside of the agents section tag. We'll give it a width of 50% and a margin bottom of 4 rem. And that's this paragraph here. We want that spacing underneath it, and we want it to be only about 50% width instead of stretching across the entire container. Okay, so next we'll grab the div with a class of flex inside of the agents tag, and we're going to say flex wrap and padding of 0. So flex wrap is just saying that if the elements inside of the FlexBox, if they get too wide to fit on one line, it's okay to wrap them to the second line or possibly third or fourth line. Since ours are going to each have a width of about 32% and we have 6 of them, we're only going to need 2 rows. If we didn't put flex wrap of wrap, FlexBox would try to put all 6 on one row and squeeze them in there. That's not what we want. So flex wrap of wrap and padding of 0. And then next we're going to do the agents section again, and inside of that we're going to grab each of the divs with a class of card, and that's each of these realtor cards here. We're going to give it a width of 32%, set the background to hashtag F0, 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 which is a very, very light gray color. Set the margin bottoms to 2 rem, that's to give some spacing in between them. And then let's grab the images inside of each card, width of 100%. Make sure that they are only as large as their container will allow. Next, we'll grab the H3 tag inside of the card. We're going to change the font family to our custom font, Play Fair Display, backup of serif, and set the color to hashtag 000, which is black, and that's these header tags inside there. Next, we're going to grab the H3 and the paragraph tags in one line, and we're going to say padding left 1 rem, and that's to give them some space from the left side of their container wall. And that should do it for the agents section. So let's move on to best real estate company section. So start and end company styles. Oh man, I cannot type. Okay, so the next section here is this one, which should be even easier to do than the agents section. So we'll do hashtag the best. And that's grabbing that entire section. Set the margin of 2 rem and 0 for 2 rem on the top and the bottom and 0 on the right and the left. And then let's grab our flex container and the image, which is an immediate child of that flex container, which is this image over to the left. And set it to a width of 47%. And then we'll grab the immediate div child of the flex container, which is this right side section here, this entire div. And we'll set that to a width of 40%. Then let's grab the unordered list, which is this list here, and we're just going to say padding left of 20 pixels, margin bottom of 4 rem. And then let's grab the list items inside of there, and we'll say margin 10 pixels 0. And that's to space them out vertically from one another. And that should be it for that entire section. A little bit easier. Let's go on to the services section. So start services styles and services styles. Okay, so the first thing, let's grab that section tag by its ID, set a background of F8, F9, FA, padding of 6 rem 0, margin of 8 rem 0, and a border bottom of 1 pixel solid, hashtag DEE2E6. And let's see what we're doing here. So we're adding quite a bit of spacing between this section and the ones above and below it. That's where we get these 6 rem and 8 rem for the padding and the margin. Next, let's grab the H2 tag inside of this section, text align of center, margin bottom 3 rem, and then let's grab the flex container, and we're going to say again flex wrap is wrap because we have more than enough items that they need to wrap to 2 different rows. And then we'll say services flex and the immediate div children of that flex container, which is each of these div tags holding all of each of those items content. And we're going to say width of 30% for each of those, and a margin bottom of 2 rem. Next, we're going to grab the font awesome icons inside of each of those divs. We're going to set the color to that orangish yellow, hashtag F69314. We're going to increase the font size to 40 pixels. We're going to float them left. Set the margin top to 15 pixels to bring them down just a little bit vertically. Set the width to 20% and text align them center. Next, we will do the flex immediate div services card right. So this is going to grab this right section here of content, which we wrapped in a div with a class of services card right. We're going to float that section right and give it a width of 75%. Next, we're going to grab the link tags, or the anchor tags inside of each of those sections, and we're going to give them a color of hashtag F69314 and text decoration of none, so that they don't have a underline until we hover on them. And so let's do that next. Let's just copy and paste this, :hover. So on hover, we want them to be underlined when they're hovered over. And that should do it for the services section. So let's quickly go on to the testimonials. So start testimonial styles and testimonials styles. So hashtag testimonials, grab that whole section, set a margin bottom to 8 rem. Oops. And then grab the H2 tag inside of there, set it to a text align center, and then we're going to grab the testimonials slider and grab each of the slick slide items inside of that, which is each slide item, each carousel item has a class of slick slide. And we're going to say text align center because we can see that everything is aligned in the center. Then I'm going to copy this, this testimonials slider hashtag, as we're going to be reusing it quite a bit to select several elements inside of there. So we're going to select the block quote elements. We're going to say font size 1.5 rem, font style italic, margin 1 rem, auto 3 rem, and then max width of 740 pixels. Next, we're going to grab the testimonials caption with a 200 pixels and a margin 0 auto. That's to kind of get these things horizontally centered underneath the block quote. Next, we will again grab testimonials caption and the image inside of it. We're going to say float left, border radius 30 pixels, width 60 pixels. And that's to create this rounded smaller image for each of our clients. And then next we're going to say testimonials caption and grab the paragraph tags inside of there. We'll say position relative, top 13 pixels, font size 1.2 rem. Then we're going to grab the slick arrows, which are these left and right arrows. And we're going to text decoration none, position absolute, font size 40 pixels, color hashtag of 222, which is lighter black, top 50%, and the margin top negative 35 pixels. And that should vertically center those and style them to look like the left and right arrows that we have here. And then finally in this section we're going to grab the slick next arrow and we're going to position this over to the right, so right 0. And that should do it for the testimonials styles. Let's go ahead and just quick sanity check, see where we're at. So let's refresh our in progress project here. Looking good so far. We haven't initialized our slider yet, so we're not going to see the next and previous for this, but stylistically things are looking okay. These are huge images right now because we have not started the slider. Agents section's looking good. We haven't initialized this slider yet, so we can see all 3 of them at once. We'll fix that. Haven't done the contact us or the footer yet, so that still looks terrible. All right, so we're coming along. Next is the contact us section. Let's quickly move on to that. So start contact us styles, end contact us styles. Let's grab the contact section by its ID, give it a background of hashtag F8F9FA, padding 4 rem on the top, 0 on the right and the left, and 8 rem on the bottom. Next, let's grab the H2 tag, text align center, margin bottom 4 rem. Then let's target the form container by its ID, give it a width of 58%. Background hashtag FFF, which is white, padding 3 rems all around, and we'll say box sizing border box so that the padding does not add on to the overall width of the container. Next, let's grab the form container's H3 tag, it's inside of it, And this one is going to be using one of our custom fonts as well, but the color is going to be #000, which is black, and the font family Playfair, display, backup of serif, margin bottom of 2 rem. And that was this contact form header tag inside of there. So next we will grab the form container labels, display block, color, #000, which is black, margin top of 1 rem. That's to give some spacing in between each of these labels and input boxes. Next we're going to grab the inputs and the text area inside of our form container. These are going to be display block, border radius of 20 pixels, padding 10 pixels, border 1 pixel solid, #ZED for DA, which is that light gray, width of 100% for each of those. Again, box sizing border box, height 43 pixels, and our custom font Roboto, Helvetica, and sans serif. Backup, font size 1 rem, color #495057, which is that darker gray. Next we're going to grab the text area by itself, set the height of it to 170 pixels, give it a margin bottom of 2 rem, and set the resize property to none so that our users cannot click and drag and resize this and possibly screw up our layout. Okay, so next let's work on the address container, which is over to the right hand side here. So #address container, width 38%, background FFF, which is white, padding 1.5 rems, box sizing border box, and a height of 300 pixels. Next we're going to grab the labels inside of our address container, set those to a font weight of 700, display block, and margin top of 2 rem. Next we will grab the first label only and set its margin top to 0. Next we are going to grab the address tag itself inside of the address container, which is this thing here. So address container address, margin bottom 1.5 rem, font style normal, because the address tag sets the font to italic by default. Set that back to normal. Next we're going to grab the link, the anchor tags inside. Text decoration none, we don't want them to be underlined when you hover. F69314 for that orangish yellow color. And then finally the links on hover will be text decoration, text decoration underline. Oops, and I misspelled the word container. Got to be careful with that. Okay, address container A, hover, text decoration underline. And that should do it for the contact us styles. Let's move on to the footer, which is the last section. Then we'll just do the media queries for responsive and the JavaScript, and we'll be done with this. So start footer styles, end footer styles. Let's grab the footer tag. Set the background to #333, a lighter black, padding 8 rem on the top and bottom, 0 on the right and the left. Got a lot of padding on the footer. And then let's grab the flex container inside of the footer. We're going to give it a padding bottom of 6 rem, and that's going to be the spacing in between the footer and the copyright. And then a border bottom of 1 pixel solid and #777. Next, let's grab all the H5 header elements inside of the footer, set those to a white color, hashtag FFF, margin bottom 1 rem, font weight 300. Then we're going to grab just the H5 with a class of follow us and set the margin top to 1 rem. And that's so that we can have some spacing above just this header tag here. Next, we're going to grab the footer about div. So the div with the class of footer-about is this first div on the left. Set the width of it to 47%. And then next we will, let's just copy that because we need to pull out the P tag inside of the footer about section. So the paragraph will be a width of 65%. Again, we don't want this to stretch the entire width of that container. Just about 65% of it. And then footer quick links, width of 16%. This is a considerably smaller section width-wise. So footer.footer quick links, width of 16%. Footer.footer quick links, unordered list. So the UL tag, list style type none. Get rid of the default padding and margin on unordered lists. Next we'll grab footer quick links ULLI and set the margin to 10 pixel and 0 to give it some vertical spacing from one another. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this because now we're going to target the A tags next. So set the color to 777, text decoration none, and then on the A hover, we want the B color FFF or white, and that's when we hover over this, it changes to a white color. So that's what we're doing there. Okay, next we have the footer.footer subscribe div, width of 35%, and that's this third section over here to the right. And then inside of the subscribe container, so we'll grab the subscribe container by its ID, set the position to relative, scroll down here. Then we're going to grab the footer subscribe, all the inputs inside of that footer subscribe section, set the border radius to 30 pixels, the height to 43 pixels. Font family is going to be that Roboto custom with a Helvetica and sans serif backup. Border 1 pixel, solid, hashtag 6C757D, and then background color transparent, font size 1 rem, padding 10 pixels, color hashtag FFF, which is white, box sizing border box, width 80%. Quite a bit of styling for this one input box. Next, let's grab the button with a class of right rounded. And this one's got quite a bit of CSS to go on it as well. So we're going to be doing border top right radius 30 pixels, border bottom right radius 30 pixels. And that's so that we only have the top right and the bottom right of that button rounded, while the top left and bottom left stay square. Set the background to that orangish yellow color, F69314. Font size 16 pixels. Color hashtag 000, which is a black color. Padding 10 pixel, 30 pixels, 9 pixels. Line height 1.5. Cursor pointer. Get rid of the border. Set the position to absolute, and the right positioned is 0. So it sticks over to the very right side and kind of sits on top of this input element. Okay, and then the footer right rounded button on hover should change the background color to #FFF, which is white. So if I hover over this, it kind of fades into that white color. Okay, so next we need to do the footer subscribe unordered list. So footer.footer subscribe UL. The style type is none. And this is the unordered list that holds our social media links down here. So the style type is none, padding is 0, margin is 0. Next, I'll just copy this because we need to grab the LIs and then the A's inside of those. So copy that, UL, LI, display inline blocks so that they sit next to each other horizontally, and then margin 0 on the top and bottom and 16 pixels on the right and the left to space them out from one another horizontally. And then next, let's grab the LI first child only and set the margin left to 0. And then we'll grab all of the anchor tags inside of those list items, set the text decoration to none and the color to #777. And then we'll grab the A's on hover, the A tags on hover, and set the color to FFF or white. So when I hover over these links, they turn to a white color. So that's the hover effect there. And then let's do this copyright section on the bottom, which was in a small tag. So we'll grab the small tag. And then we're going to say margin top 3 rem, font size 1 rem, display block, text align center. Then let's grab the hyperlink inside of the small tag, color 777, text decoration none. Then we'll grab the link on hover and set the color to FFF or white. And that's so that the word colorlib on hover will be white so that we know it's a hyperlink. And that does it for all of the desktop only styles. So if we refresh our work in progress here, there we go. Footer's looking good. Contact us section's coming together. We still haven't initialized our sliders in our JavaScript yet, so those are still going to be all messed up looking. The one problem we still need to solve is the media queries, so that this will be properly responsive. So you can see as I drag it down to a smaller screen width, everything kind of gets all jumbled up. It doesn't look very nice. It doesn't stack one on top of the other. So let's go ahead and do that now in our CSS with media queries. So I'll say start media queries, end media queries, and let's just get right into it. So the first one, at media, max width 991 pixels, a common breakpoint. So we want to do first is grab the logo by its ID. We want to set the top position to 1 pixels. Let's move it up a little bit. Grab the nav toggle by its ID, and that should be the Hamburger Menu button. And we'll say display block. So we want that Hamburger Menu button to be visible on screens that are 991 pixels or smaller. And then if the Hamburger Menu button is visible, our unordered list of nav links will be position fixed, background of FFF or white, and this is that flyout menu, right of -100%, so that by default it is off the page to the right, so it looks like it's invisible. Top 0, margin 0, padding 2 rem, height 100%, so it's as large as the entire screen, width 300 pixels, box sizing is border box, so the padding does not increase the width. and box shadow 5 pixels, 0, 10 pixels, 3 pixels, hashtag 999. This will give it that kind of, let's take a quick look at it one more time. So if we go to the working prototype here, that box shadow kind of gives it this little darker shadow border to kind of make it look a little bit nicer there. Okay, so that should do it for the unordered list in there. Now let's target that close flyout by its ID. Let's say position absolute, right 2 rem, top 1.5 rem, font size 30 pixels, color hashtag 777, cursor pointer, display block, line height 1, and margin 0. And that's that close button on the flyout. That's this thing right here, this X. Let me just leave it at a smaller screen there. Okay, so next is going to be the unordered list items. So nav ULLI. Those are going to be display block with a margin of 20 pixels and 0. So that we're going to set them to block so that they naturally stack one on top of the other, and a margin 20 pixels on the top and the bottom and 0 on the right and the left, so that we have more vertical spacing between each one. Next, let's target just the first list item. So nav ULI colon first child, and then we'll set the margin top to 50 pixels. And that's to kind of space it down further from the top vertically. Next, we're going to grab the anchor links inside of our list items. So nav ULLIA, font size 20 pixels. Let's increase the font size a bit and set the color to 212529, which is a darker color. And then let's target the links with a class of active and also when they're hovered over. And we're going to change that color to that hashtag F69314, orangish yellow color, so that when we hover over them, they change that color. Okay, and that should do it for this 991 pixel breakpoint. Let's go ahead and do the next common breakpoint, which is 767 pixels. So at media, space, parentheses, max width 767 pixels. Let's target the H1 elements. Let's bring their font size down to 2 rems. H2s, bring their font size down to 1.75 rems. H3s, bring their font size down to 1.2 rems. And the large paragraphs, bring those down to a 1 rem font size. And then the regular paragraph tags, font size down to 0.8 rems. And set everything with a class of container down to a max width of 540 pixels, since we're on smaller screens here. And then let's target the hero section, the hero text, which is this text all the way up at the top. So we're targeting that text here. Give it a width of 400 pixels. Next, let's target the cards within the agents section, and we're going to give them each a width of 49%, and that's so that instead of having 3 realtors on one row like this, if our screen is lower than 767 pixels, it's going to naturally break down to only 2 cards on one row. Because we increase the width of each card to 49%, so we get 2 on each row, 3 total rows. Next, let's target the best section, the image inside of there. We're going to set that to a display of none. So let's see, here's that section here. If our screen is larger than 767, we get that image back. Where'd it go? Right here, see? On smaller screens, we're just going to get rid of this image completely and only show the marketing text over here. Next, let's target the best flex div and set that to 100%. So that's this entire container over here containing all this text and this button. Right now its width is like 40% or something. On smaller screens we want it to be 100% width because the image is going to be invisible, display none. So set that to 100%. Next we will go down to the Testimonials section. So Testimonials slider, and the paragraphs and size. Let's set the 1.25. Set the font size to 1.2 rems. Then in the properties section, let's target that pseudo element of the container, which was this slash up here. We're going to target that and we're going to say top 2 pixels, font size 0.85 rems. Next, in the properties slider, we're going to grab the slick arrows and we're going to say font size 0.85 rems. And that's going to be to bring this font size of the previous and the next links down a little bit on smaller screens. Next, we have inside the properties section the rounded button. Down here it says view all property listings. We're going to decrease that width to 300 pixels on smaller screens. Okay, next the services section. Let's grab the divs inside of the flex containers. So that is down here. And we're going to set each of those to a width of 48% so that again on smaller screens, instead of having 3 in one row, they're going to break down to 2 per row. And we accomplish that by setting the width to 48% of each of those div elements. Next, we'll grab the flex container inside of the contact section. Say flex wrap of wrap. What that's going to do is allow the contact form in the address box to wrap one on top of the other. And then we need to set the form container, which is this container on the left here, to 100% width, the margin top of 2 rem to give it some spacing in between it and the thing above it. And then we need to set the address container as well to width 100%, margin top 2 rem. And actually this form container should not have a margin top. This form container just needs the padding to be reduced a bit to 2 rems. So this spacing in the form of padding here on smaller screens, we're going to bring that down a bit to leave more room for the elements inside of the form. So form container with 100%, padding 2 rems, address container with 100%, margin top 2 rems. Next, let's grab the footer, entire footer tag, and reduce the padding down to 6 rems on the top and the bottom and 0 on the right and the left. Then grab the flex container inside of the footer and we're going to say allow your items to wrap. Flex wrap is wrap. And then each of the divs inside of the footer, inside of the flex container of the footer, we're going to set the width to 100% and each of them margin top of 1 rem so that all three of those footer items here will now stack one on top of the other. Okay, so next we'll grab the footer flex container and just the first div child and set that margin top to 0. Next we will grab the footer about section, the paragraph tag inside, which is this paragraph over here on the left. So just that paragraph, and we're going to say font size 1 rem and let it have 100% width instead of the 65% that it has now on larger screens. And then footer subscribe input. So this input box over here for enter email, let's grab that and let's say width 90%. Next, let's grab the H5 inside of the footer section that has a class of follow us, which is going to be this H5 down here only. And that one we're going to say margin top of 2 rem on screens of 767 pixels or smaller. Okay, that does it for that breakpoint. Let's do another media query for screens of 500 pixels or smaller. So max width 500 pixels. Let's grab the hero text at the top once again and set that to a width of 330 pixels. And then grab the cards inside of the agents section and set those to a width of 100%. And again, what this is doing is currently on smaller screens that are less than 767, let's see, which is about right here, we have 2 agents per row. On screens that are 500 pixels or smaller, which is mainly mobile devices, we're going to have 1 real estate agent per row. That's a width of 100%. It forces the rest of them to wrap down below. So now we'll have 6 rows, 1 on each row, right? So that's what we're doing there. Then the how it works section, grab the flex, and now we're just going to say display block. So no longer act as a flex container. So rather than these being horizontally organized, we'll just say no longer behave as a FlexBox, behave as a regular old display block div, and that will make these naturally stack one on top of the other. So display block on that, and then how it works. So let's grab each of those immediate div children of the flex container, which is each of these things, and we'll say width 100%. Margin top 2 rem. Next, let's grab the properties button rounded, which is this button here. And that one we want to set the width to 250 pixels. So it's a little bit even smaller on smaller screens. Next, let's grab the agents section. Say margin 4 rem 0 3 rem, padding 0 0 3 rem. So we're going to bring that spacing between the agents section and the other sections around it a little bit smaller on mobile devices. And let's actually organize this a little bit better. So let's put the agents CSS up with the other agents CSS up here. And then I think we want to also grab the large paragraph within the agents section. So, oops, agents p.large paragraph. We'll set the width to 100%. And that's so on smaller screens, this paragraph will stretch 100% of the width rather than just 50%. Okay, so next let's move on to the services. And we're going to bring the padding down to 4 rem 0 3 rem for that section, and margin 4 rem 0. Next we will grab the flex container's immediate div children inside of the services container, set them to 100%, and again that is so that they will each be 100% width, and they will stack one on top of the other on smaller screens, like so. So we have 1 per row now instead of 3. So we're setting each of those to 100% so that they'll automatically take up the full width and stack one on top of the other. So next, let's go to testimonials and set the margin bottom to 4 rem, bring that down a bit, and then testimonials slider, the paragraph tags inside of the slider, bring that font size down to 1 rem, I'm going to copy this hashtag testimonial slider because we're going to use it a few more times here. Grab the slick arrow inside of that slider and say display none important. That's so that on smaller screens we don't get this ugly, ugly left and right arrow because it's a touch screen slider. We don't need these on smaller screens. Okay, next let's grab the contact padding for rem 0, so we'll bring that spacing down a bit on that entire section. Let's grab the H2 element inside of the contact and set the margin bottom to 2 rem. Next we'll grab the form container and set the padding to 1.5 rem all around. So we're going to bring that spacing inside of this contact form down a bit on touchscreens, on smaller touchscreens. And then finally, let's grab the footer element and bring the padding of that down a little bit smaller, less spacing surrounding the footer element on smaller screens. And that should do it for our media queries. So if we go ahead and refresh our work in progress here, let's bring this down a little bit and see how we're doing. So now we can see everything is kind of responding down appropriately. The footer elements are stacking one on top of the other. Everything is kind of centered. It's looking nice. We still haven't initialized our sliders in our JavaScript, so those don't really work yet. These are kind of collapsing down nicely. We'll fix that in a second. How it works section collapses down, and so does this. This hamburger isn't working yet, the hamburger menu, so let's work on our JavaScript next. This will be exciting. So we're done with our CSS. If we go back to our HTML file, I'm going to go ahead and just put the JavaScript down at the bottom of our HTML file because there's not that much. And again, I want to re-emphasize that we're using some dependencies here, which are completely necessary for the code I'm about to write. If any of these are missing, it will not work. So we have jQuery, font awesome, slick slider plugin, and of course our custom CSS, which we just wrote in styles.css. Okay, let's get into it. So down at the bottom of, and you know what, I forgot to close the HTML tag. Let's go ahead and close our HTML tag here. HTML, whoops. So at the bottom of the footer tag, still inside the body, let's add a script tag for JavaScript. And then a closing script tag. And then let's add a document ready function, which in jQuery looks something like this. $ parentheses function. And then what this is saying is wait until the page is loaded before executing any of the code in this function. So let's create a few variables to grab some of our HTML elements. So using jQuery, we're going to say grab the header element and store it in a variable called header elem. Grab the logo element by its ID and store it in a variable called logo. Similarly for the nav menu and nav toggle. Okay, so we're going to be using these variables throughout. Okay, the first thing we want to do is initialize our properties carousel. So if we go back up here to the properties section, where is it at? Services. Okay, here's the properties section. We have this div with an ID of properties slider. That's what we're going to use to initialize this entire carousel, because inside of this div we have one div, two divs, right? 3, 4, 5, and each of these divs are going to represent one of our carousel items. Inside, of course, we have the image and a bunch of property details text. So let's use that ID down in our JavaScript to initialize that slider. So $ hashtag property slider, and the slick slider works like this. So you do $ dot, or you grab the element and then you do .slick, and you pass in a JavaScript object. And again, I'm not going to go over exactly how a lot of this works. I have it all kind of configured already for this tutorial. Leave a comment down in the video if you would like an explanation on this. So I'm going to pass in a bunch of configuration options here to the Slick Slider plugin, and they're pretty self-explanatory. It basically says show 4 carousel items at a time, scroll 1 item at a time, and then here's the HTML for our previous and our next buttons. And then we have this responsive array of objects with specific breakpoints. So at 1100 pixels or less, we're only going to show 3 slides at a time. At 767 or less, we're going to show 2 at a time. 530 pixels or less, we're going to show 1 at a time. So that's what's happening there. Let's go ahead and move on to the testimonials slider. Similarly, we have an element with an ID of testimonials slider. We're going to do .slick. We're going to pass in an object, and this object is going to be a little bit less complicated because we don't have any responsive aspect to this. We're always only going to show 1 slide at a time, so we don't need to worry about the responsive aspect of this. Infinite to true, slide to show 1, slide to scroll 1. So that will initialize the testimonials slider. And again, I'll have links to the Slick Slider API documentation in the description of this video, along with all this code in a CodePen. You guys can all kind of refer back to. Okay, so with the Slick Slider plugins initialized for our 2 carousels, let's move on to the nav toggle. So let's add a click event to it. I'm going to use ES6 plus syntax. So we're going to attach a click event to our nav toggle, which is the Hamburger menu. And on click, we want to say nav menu.css right 0. And that's basically going to set the position of the right of our flyout nav menu, to 0, which has it kind of position itself to the right side of the page. If we close it, it sets that right position back to 100% or negative 100%, which is off the right side of the page. So it looks like it's gone. So that's how we're accomplishing that. So on click, set the nav menu to the right of 0, nav menu CSS to right of 0. And then when they click the close flyout button, so let's add a click event to that. And in this click event, we're going to basically say nav menu.css right negative 100%. And that's to fly it back outside of the screen like it's gone. Next, let's attach a click to the document. Document.onClick. We'll pass in our event object to the function. And what we're doing here is if we have the flyout menu visible, we can close it by clicking the X button here, or we can close it by clicking anywhere else on the page. So in order to accomplish something like this, we have to attach a click event to everywhere else on the page except this element here, and that should close it. So in our document click, we'll say if, and then this is going to be, well, actually let's first create a variable. So target equals $e.target, and that's going to grab whatever element was clicked on out of the event object here that's inside the click. So let target equals $e.target. So now we have if target.closest, which is a jQuery method to search for elements in its hierarchical chain. If target.closest nav toggle .length is greater than 0, or target.closest nav menu .length is greater than 0. Either of those are true. Let me pull this over a bit. Either of those are true. We want to return false out of this click event and not do anything. And what that means is that if either of these are true, what it means is that we got a click somewhere inside of this nav menu. And if we have a click inside of here, we don't want to close this menu, right? Because they might be clicking certain links to get to certain different pages. If we have not gotten inside of this if, that means that the click happened outside of this nav menu box, somewhere out here. If that happens, then we want to do navmenu.css right -100%. Similarly to if they clicked on the close X button, right? We want to get rid of that nav menu. Next, we want to add a scroll event. So add it to the document, .scroll, and then add a function. So every time a user scrolls the page, we're going to run this function. Let's grab the spacing that it was scrolled from the top of the document. So $document.scroll top will give us how many pixels away from the very top of the page we had scrolled, right? So if you're at the very top of the page, this scroll top value is going to be 0 because we're 0 pixels away from the top of the page. As they scroll down the page, this value will increase. So we want to know exactly how far they scrolled. And then let's do some if-else logic here. So if scroll top is greater than 0, which means they've scrolled some distance away from the top of the page, we want to set the nav menu to have a class of isSticky, because some of our CSS depends on whether or not this nav menu has a class of isSticky. So if we inspect this, there it is. The unordered list here has the class of isSticky, right? If I scroll back up, it no longer has that class. So this is what we're trying to accomplish here. So nav menu class isSticky. If scroll top is greater than 0, we'll add that class. Then we'll set the logos CSS to color #000, which is a black color. And that's this logo here. So as they scroll down, the background turns white, the text turns black. Next, let's grab the header element, .css, background, FFF. And that's going to make the entire header's background to white. #FFF is a white color. Next, we'll do navtoggle.css. Oops, border color, #000, which is a black color. Navtoggle.find anything with a class of strip, which are those 3 strips in the Hamburger menu. Say .css, background, color, #FFF to white. So let's see what's happening there. When we're at the top of the page, the Hamburger menu is white. The strips inside of it are also white. As we scroll down and the header has a background of white, our Hamburger menu turns to a color of black. That's what we're doing here. Okay, so next, let's go into our else clause. So if scroll top is not greater than 0, which means we're at the very top of the page, we're going to remove that class of isSticky. And then we're going to set the logo CSS, logo CSS, oh my goodness, color FFF. And that's if we're at the very top, the logo color turns back to white. And then header elem.css, background back to transparent instead of the white. And then navtoggle.css, border color back to white. And navtoggle.find anything with a class of strip, which are those spans. We're going to set the background color of those back to white as well. And that's kind of handling that functionality there. And then next we have header elem.css. So now we're going to do some inline if-else logic, or the ternary operator. So if scroll top is greater than or equal to 200 pixels, if that's true, we want to pass in the following CSS. Padding 0.5, whoops, padding 0.5 rem, box shadow, of 0, -4 pixels, 10 pixels, 1 pixel, hash 999. And then otherwise, if it's not, those pop-ups are annoying. Otherwise, if the scroll top is not greater than or equal to 200, we're going to pass in the following CSS. Padding 1 rem 0, box shadow none. So that's kind of like writing if-else logic, similar to what we did up here, but since it's just one element, I just chose to do it using the ternary operator, which is this question mark. So if we scrolled greater than or equal to 200 pixels away from the top of the screen, which is right there, you see how it kind of got a little bit smaller in its height? That's because we reduced the padding down. And if we keep scrolling, we can also see that there is also a box shadow being applied to it to give it that cool little effect that it looks like it's on top of the other elements. And if we go back to less than 200 pixels away from the top, you can see it grows again in height, and that's because we set our padding back to 1 rem on the top and the bottom, and the box shadow is no longer there. So that's what's happening there. Last thing we need to do is on page load, we need to trigger our scroll event in case a user refreshes the page and they're already scrolled down a little bit. We need to make sure that our header got the correct treatment on page load. If they start at the very top of the page, we're fine, because the treatment should be the default treatment, which is the transparent background and the white logo, and et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and save all of our work. Let's go over here to our prototype. Let's refresh our prototype. Let's see that everything's working. So click this, we got our flyout. Oh, that's weird. So we're missing the close button. So it still closes when we click over here. That's weird. I must have missed that in the HTML somewhere. So let's go ahead and see what happened there. Let's go back up to the header. So the nav menu, we have home, properties. Okay, let's go ahead and add another list item down at the bottom. Say li, give it an ID of close flyout. And then inside of there, we'll say span class. We're going to use font awesome to get that X icon. So we have a new list item with an ID of close flyout, and inside a span tag of FAS FA times. Save that, refresh our prototype. Let's try that again. There it is. Now we got our close button. And it's working. It's sliding out nice and smooth as we scroll this. Oh man, I got another bug. So it looks like it's working, but the color of the Hamburger Menu strips did not change along with it, nor did it change along with it back. Let's go back down to our JavaScript and see what might have happened. So there's always some bugs, right? I'm just going to quickly look through here to see. I'm sure I have some typo somewhere. Nav toggle.find. Oh, of course. When scroll top is greater than 0, this should be black, not white. So 0, 0, 0. Whoops. Is that it? All right, let's refresh. That still works. As I scroll, there we go. Now we can see our Hamburger Menu. It shrinks down a little bit more. Okay, let's check our sliders here. So next, next, next. Seems to be working. Previous works one at a time. What if we take our page down a little bit smaller? Collapses down to 2 items. Still slides nice. It's also touch friendly. If we go even smaller, breaks down to 1 item. Next, next, next. Okay, so that's working. Flyout menu still works fine. Bring this back out. And the other slider, here we go, what our clients are saying seems to be working. We got our arrows, and if we go smaller screen, our arrows should disappear. So let's go a little bit smaller. So there it is. And the arrows are gone on very small screens, but we can still scroll via the touch effect. So that is basically this project. I will have I will have a link to the code in a CodePen in the description of the video. And if you have any other questions about this, please feel free to leave a comment in the video. I'm pretty quick to respond. And if anything doesn't work, you can always compare your code that you've written to the code that can be found in the CodePen in the description of the video. Because small syntax errors could cause the whole thing to break. And once again, this was a free template created by colorlib.com. It's not my work. I pulled all the images from colorlib.com as well. Other than that, everything I wrote this from scratch looking at their design. I didn't copy any code. This is all kind of my code from scratch. Pulled their images and used some free third-party libraries to help with some of the more complicated effects, such as a carousel and the custom Google fonts and font awesome icons, such as these little icons here. So I hope you like this video. I know it was a long one. I tend to do pretty involved projects to help master HTML and CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. And stay tuned for the next one. Thank you.